Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. There are many people who have experienced trauma in their lives but may be reluctant to explore therapy as an avenue towards healing. Maybe what happens in therapy or the mystique behind the types of therapies has held you back. Maybe talking to a third party about the abuse that you've suffered is difficult for you. Well, we're very fortunate on our program to have Dr. Ramona Probasco, author of Healing Well and Living Free from an Abusive Relationship from Victim to Survivor to Overcomer, as a regular guest here on the third Monday of every month at the 11 o'clock hour. She is not only a doctor in psychology and conducted extensive research in the area of domestic violence, but she's also been a victim of domestic violence, and as such, in her practice of over 20 years, she's not only been able to impart her educational background, but also her personal experience in navigating the trials and the traumas that go along with abuse. Here to join us right now, you can find her at healingwellandlivingfree.com, is our very wonderful, delightful guest, Dr. Ramona Probasco. Dr. Ramona, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Rabbi. This is one of my, if not my most favorite Monday of the month, and that's the truth. I love our chats.
Well, I can tell you that so many people, I love it as well. You and I have a very special connection in the fact that I do consider you to be my safe person. I've been able to share with you in a very personal environment and a very public transparency on the part of both of us. I think what resonates with them is the reality that you and I have both been through some pretty tough patches in our life, but on this side of it, we can look back on it and say, thank you, Lord, for sustaining me. Thank you, Lord, for allowing me to use the same way that the characters of the Bible use their story to bring people to faith and understanding and to healing, and to believe that Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free. And you and I live with that every day, that we were brokenhearted, we were held captive, and now we've been set free.
You know, it's so interesting because that is the verse. I don't know, can you see this, Rabbi?
I can indeed.
You see it? Okay. The verse you just quoted out of Isaiah 61, that's the verse the Lord gave me when I was still early in my marriage, but the physical abuse at that point had started. Often with our stories, they start before we even begin telling them, knowing that we have a story, they start. And the Lord gave me that verse, 25 years ago. And shortly before my book was released last June, my sweetie and I am happily remarried. Tim and I were going out for a walk, and we were walking through a new subdivision where they were building these new homes. And I said to Tim, I said, sweetie, I said, what if I spent 4 years, 20 years living the story, 4 years writing it? What if no one reads the book? What if no one cares? And I was kind of having this woe is me moment. And I walked behind this house, Rabbi, and there was these boxes of cement that were just kind of thrown there. And there were some empty ones. And I looked down, and that verse, Isaiah 61, was written on the bottom of the box. And I told Tim, I said, sweetie, I said, I want to rip that and keep that with me. So whenever I do an interview, whenever I travel, whenever I speak, I always bring the bottom of that box, because the Lord keeps his promises.
Amen. Amen. Well, I can assure you that based on the traffic we see, that people are reading your book and people are watching this. Actually, for the month of February, our theme for the month includes abuse recovery, and we're directing all of our audience to a curated page of just your interviews, Mark Baker's interviews on overcoming shame, as well as a couple of others who have gone through this healing process. So we're actually curating it for the audience. Our marketing company has done a big push, and that's this month's theme. And so when we do a monthly theme, and we curate and create a YouTube playlist that directs people who receive the email takes them right to that, and they see a whole curated list of these are all the ones about abuse, about healing, about recovery, and just watch these. So because we have like 1,300 videos out there, it's very hard to navigate the topics. So we do that on a monthly basis. And the month of February, and the reason we picked the month of February was because February is one of the great pitfall months. February 14th, especially for abused, is a great pitfall month. It's either fear and trepidation while you're in a relationship that you will say or do the wrong thing and it will ignite an explosion because either you didn't prepare the right dinner or you didn't buy the right gift or whatever, whichever side of this equation, male or female, that you're on. And we talked about 1 in 7 men have experienced physical abuse in a relationship. That this is not just a women's issue, this is an overall issue. That there are pitfall months and birthdays, anniversaries, Valentine's Day being one of them, that are trigger events that cause a lot of people a lot of heartache and trepidation. So we chose this month as being a month of encouragement and a month to equip people beforehand, because we launched it in January. We send it out and say February is the month, and we give you a couple of weeks to watch, and we watch the numbers on the YouTube views to see that people are actually migrating to that playlist and going to it and watching it. So they're hearing about it, and these are kind of vicarious therapy sessions that hopefully are giving people the opportunity to extract themselves from the abusive relationship, whether it's through separation, till they can both get healing and find a way to coexist in a healthy relationship, or to find a safe haven and protection from that abuse. And so the migration from healing well, living free from abuse, moving from victim to survivor to overcomer, it's kind of like weight gain and weight loss. You didn't gain all that weight in 6 months, and you're not going to lose all that weight in 6 months. You didn't get into this abusive relationship, lasted 20 years, and now you want to get out of it in a week and you want to recover in a week. It's a process.
It's a great example.
We have to help guide them through this process. Valentine's Day. How did you spend yours with your sweetie?
Mm-hmm. This is going to sound corny, but it's true. Honestly, every day to us is an opportunity to be kind to our Valentine, and so although we recognize it as a day where people can choose to set aside to recognize and be grateful for the people that they love, Tim and I really do earnestly, we're intentional about treating each other every day of the year like we'd want to be treated on Valentine's. So I was actually sick, and so I to be honest, a little TMI, I stayed in my bathrobe all day because I was really sick. I had spoken at a writers' conference a few days prior, and I think I hugged too many people and shook too many hands, and I picked up some kind of ick. But we celebrated on Saturday and went to dinner, and just really, it's like what we always do. It's about, to me, not so much the day as it is, am I loving myself in a healthy way? And am I also choosing to love those people in my life, whether it's an intimate partner or a platonic relationship? Am I loving them the way that I want to be loved as well? I mean, that's to me what Valentine's is all about. It's a moment we kind of reflect on that, or we can.
You reminded me of something that I say every year at Christmas, that Christmas is one day a year where everybody seems to be so kind to each other and so generous to each other. And I look at it as the day that's the reminder day that says that you are capable of doing this, and why should every day If I know that you're capable of doing it one day, then I know you're capable of doing it every day. And if you're capable of doing it one day, why aren't you doing it? Just because we have a name for it doesn't mean that tomorrow, and the name of tomorrow is tomorrow. Actually, the name of tomorrow is today, because tomorrow never gets here. So if you can do it today, then you can do it in tomorrow's today. And you can continue that pattern, and you have no excuse that if you can go 1 out of 365 days and go 24 hours and show acts of kindness, then you are capable of doing that every day. It's a matter of whether or not you're intentional and you choose to do that every day.
Right. And I want to be clear about something, because I understand people are seeing me now. But if we rewound the tape to several years back, and really I don't even have to go that far back because I was married for 20 years, most of the Valentines were lived in the way that you described, either trepidation and some sort of fear. And there was always kind of an anxiety playing in the background, even if it was, quote, a good day. So I want to be clear to people that, like you said, if weight is your challenge and it took you so long to put it on, you're not going to drop it off in a week. I didn't get to where I am today, the peace in my eyes, the song in my heart, so to speak, without some real work. I really had to work hard, and I really had to look deep. And I really had to allow people that were further along than me in the healing process. I had to trust them to help guide me from a very dark place. I spent many Valentine's Day, and I'm sure you can resonate with this. I cried many Valentine's Days. And if they weren't tears on my face, they were the really painful ones, and those are the ones that never reach our face, the ones that stay on the inside. And so I want to be clear to people that I understand, and I'm no different than them. Just like you know what I'm saying? You lead this program. You talk to so many people. You are, reaching millions probably at this point, exponentially speaking. Did you think you were going to be doing that in this capacity and talking about your suffering in a place of from a place of strength? Like, neither one of us thought that, I thought my life was going to be a wreck forever. But that is not why Christ went to Calvary.
That's exactly
He
right.
went to the cross to clean up the wrecks.
There's that period of time where you were in the relationship the same way I was, where you couldn't talk to anybody about it because you didn't think anybody would believe you.
That's right.
You had that mask, that superficial, that face. I had a face to a congregation. I was talking with Mark Baker, and I got to get the two of you together. The Levy Counseling Centers. You just have to make that connection. You will love Mark. It's like we even look like brothers. And we talked about this, that there's not a pastor in the world that doesn't have a certain amount of struggle with being a fraud. Mm-hmm. We don't live a perfect life. We don't have a perfect home life. Nobody has a perfect home life, but you have to get up there and present a perfect picture, a perfect picture of Christ's love, a perfect picture of God's power to heal and to restore. And he's admitted, he said he's never talked to a pastor that doesn't struggle with fraud, the pastors that come to see him. My professional counselor was a counselor who specialized in pastoral betrayals. Mm-hmm. He had an entire practice where it was so prevalent that he built an entire practice around this one area of pastoral betrayal. That people either betrayed in their marriage, betrayed by their congregation, betrayed by a trusted elder, betrayed by somebody that they had gone through this betrayal. And so no one would believe. And so I actually signed a non-disclosure agreement. It expired a year ago. for 5 years that I would not speak publicly or to anybody about the details of what happened. And I was highly compensated for it. Can you imagine in ministry? Unheard of. In corporate America, buyouts happen all the time. Okay? But in ministry, it never happens. But this was something that was so egregious done to me that in order for them to ensure that I did not sue them, that I did not take them to court over this, that they settled with me. It's been a year, but I chose never to speak in detail about it from even before we signed the agreement, saying that God would vindicate me, God would restore what the locusts have eaten, that God's word was true, and I was just going to stand on God's word, and nobody was ever going to know all of the details of what happened, except the parties that were involved, and they would know the details because, one, people would find it hard to believe that there's some well-known people that were involved in a betrayal that were wrong. And they were admittedly wrong, and it would cast them in an incredibly negative light for what was done. But I just chose that it was freer if I took the whole burden, the entirety of the burden, and laid it at the foot of the cross and walked away. And I had a silent year, 1 year of silence. I only spoke to 3 people. 1 year of silence, 3 people that knew me. Now, I traveled around researching a book. I talked to a lot of people in the research of the book, but I only talked to 3 people who were my inner circle. I talked to no one outside of that. And I lived on a property that had a long driveway and had driveway alerts and driveway alarms. And congregants used to come just pull up to my house wanting to check on me or wanting to make sure I was people who were on the side that backed me, and I had a system where I had one button that would turn off all the lights in the house at the same time to make it look like I wasn't there. All right, and so when the alert went off at the top of the driveway, and it took almost a minute and a half to come all the way down the driveway, by the time you got there, the house was black. And I would just sit there quietly in a place you could, even if you looked through the windows, you weren't going to be able to find me because I chose that this was going to be this quiet period just with the Lord and my counselor and these 3 people. And it took a full year before I returned to the pulpit and had not gotten over it. I don't know you'll ever get over it, not compartmentalized it and put it in a little box and put it on a shelf, but dealt with it to the point where it didn't really matter to me if there was somebody in the audience that knew me or didn't know me, knew what happened or didn't know what happened. Didn't really matter. I didn't care. The Lord had it, and He's the one that was in. It was me and the Lord. If the Lord is for me, who can be against me? And I took my strength from that. And the last 5 years are history of going from an incredibly successful congregation, but still only reaching a couple thousand people, to here we are 5 years after that quiet period to where we are literally reaching millions of people. And this is what God does when you do it His way. And that's a part of your story as well, and the story you and I encourage people to follow. So you have these days like Valentine's Day where you're living in fear and trepidation. That's a warning sign. That's an alarm going off. What should people do when that happens?
Well, one of the things that we have to do in order to stay in an abusive relationship is we have to begin to ignore our gut. So when your gut is initially saying something's not right, you may not have the words for it. You're probably for sure not calling it abuse, but something's bothering you and you can't seem to shake it. In order to stay in these relationships, we have to push that feeling and those thoughts down. So if you're noticing and you're experiencing what you just described, what I tell people is if we turn the volume down on our gut, then the good news is we're the same person that can turn it back up. And how we do that is we listen to it. We honor our gut. If your gut is telling you, I'm scared. Fear, to me, people ask me all the time, how do I know if I'm in an abusive relationship? And I believe that they think I'm going to perhaps give them some sort of complicated or some sort of formula to follow. And I said, well, there's a lot of answers I can give you, but the simplest one is if you feel fear. Because true love is safe love. Perfect love casts out fear. Abuse, when you are feeling fear, even if a person has not raised their hand towards you, but you are feeling fear, you can be certain that your relationship has crossed over that line, and some expression of abuse is present. So what I say to people, or to answer your question, is listen to that. Begin to pay attention. Our bodies send us signals. Like I talk about in the book, I eventually developed rheumatoid arthritis, and there's a whole story how miraculously several years it took me to heal from that. And I'm fully in complete remission, and praise God, will stay there. But our body shows us, whether it's physically, emotionally, spiritually, the Lord created us to have these sensors to know when something is wrong. But in an intimate relationship, what often can happen with our partner, we don't believe that someone who tells us that they love us, who, if you're married, pledges to stay with you forever, to death do you part, to do no harm, would be the same person that you're afraid of. So our minds kind of are all twisted up. And then if you apply what you believe that God is going to want me to just pray, if I just pray enough, then I'm going to get that miracle. Well, here's the deal. I prayed like crazy. I did get the miracle, but I did not get the answer I thought I wanted, which was that Ben would stop abusing and our marriage and our relationship would be a safe, loving place. Instead, he gave me strength to begin to look at it, call it what it is, connect with healthy people, and several years of counseling and working and reading and lots of things, joining a support group. I'm here today talking to you.
It's interesting that we talk about sweeping things under a carpet. Mm-hmm. And over a course of 20 years, all you have is a big bump in the carpet.
Yeah, well, you're more like Mount St. Helens ready to erupt anytime. Yeah, I should say. That doesn't work. That doesn't work with real dirt, and that doesn't work with our emotional and stuff that we hide. It doesn't work.
God gave us pain receptors. He gave us discernment. He gave us these gut instincts, these gut reactions, and he gave them to us to honor those things, because that's a way of him speaking to us and through us. And if we ignore that, are we ignoring God? Certainly we have to test the spirits. It tells us scripturally to test the spirits and see if it lines up with the Word of God. But physical abuse has no place in any relationship.
Well, neither does emotional, verbal, or spiritual, or sexual. A lot of my clients, they are going through horrible financial abuse as well. So abuse of any kind is wrong. Abuse of any kind is sin. No. So I tell people, those that come to me and say, well, my significant other has not hit me. Okay, first of all, where are we setting the bar in our lives? And second of all, the bruises that are on the inside that people don't see. A lot of us, if we flipped us inside out, we'd be all bruised and tattered. Those bruises matter just as much to God as the physical ones. He sees those, and those matter.
There's no question. We're talking with Dr. Ramona Probasco, author of Healing Well and Living Free from an Abusive Relationship, from Victim to Survivor to Overcomer. It's an incredible book. It's incredible insight into how to get yourself out of this abusive relationship. Maybe not out of the relationship, but out of the abusive part of the relationship. The end result may be separation and divorce, but the healing that will come through following a process and getting help and starting at home with a book. Maybe it's a book you can't leave in plain sight. Maybe it's a book you have to leave in your desk drawer at work and you spend your lunch hour reading because you don't want your significant other, your spouse, to know that this is what you're feeling. But you cannot hide it from God, and you cannot hide it from yourself. And no matter how much makeup you put on, no matter how much you say, today is going to be a better day, that until you do something and take some form of action, it will not change. And it's not, you were not put on this earth to change another person. Our prayer must be, Lord, if there was going to be change, let it begin with me. That includes healing, taking responsibility, not for the abuse in your relationship, but for the abusive relationship that you are continuing to allow in your life. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about healing well and living free from an abusive relationship with Dr. Ramona Probasco. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and as we do on the third Monday of every month at the 11 o'clock Central Time hour, we talk with Dr. Ramona Probasco. She is the author of Healing Well and Living Free from an Abusive Relationship, from Victim to Survivor to Overcomer. Dr. Ramona, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Rabbi. Pleasure to be here.
I mentioned that you can get the book on Amazon and you could hide it in your desk, but you had a great idea and you wanted to share it with the audience.
Sure. Just want to let people know, if you are still in an abusive relationship, or you're in a relationship that's just causing you fear, maybe you're not using the word abuse yet, I would encourage you to consider getting the Kindle version of the book through Amazon, and that way you can just put it on your tablet or iPhone and have it secure like that.
Well, I think that's a great wisdom. We don't tend to think about the implications of having this on your bedstand.
Right.
And we need to think about the
good thing to do.
Think about the implications of your significant other saying, "Hey, I saw you have a book, Healing Well and Living Free." Oh yeah, I have a cousin, I have an aunt, I'm trying to help them out. That's not going to fly for very long, and so we have to be aware of that. In your situation, when you finally came to the realization that the circumstances weren't going to change, and you weren't going to change the other person, this is quite revelatory. There are certainly, biblically, it says that if you're married to an unbeliever, if you become a believer, don't get married to if you're a believer, don't be unequally yoked and marry an unbeliever. But if neither one of you are believers and you come to faith, that's not justification for leaving the unbeliever, because you may be the one to bring them to the Lord. Now, even if you're both believers, you may not be at the same spiritual level or spiritual growth, or even have a desire to grow spiritually. There's many who say, I've accepted the Lord, leave me alone. I'm going to heaven, and if you want to go to church and you want to do all these things. But that in too also becomes a grounds for spiritual abuse. And there are so many settings and pitfalls relationally. What are some of the things that we should be looking out for in ourselves, so that we, in first look, as we examine our own behavior, that we're not in some way projecting or exhibiting abuse to another person?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I would, are you asking me, am I being abusive,
Yes.
to check with ourselves, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think a self check. Okay, things aren't going well in my marriage.
Right.
All right, I'm going to look at myself. All right,
Right.
Search me, O Lord, and see if there's anything in me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What should I look for in myself first?
I think that's very important, regardless if you're in a toxic, hurtful, and again, I say you may not be using the word abusive, but an abusive relationship, or if you're in a healthy relationship where there's not that fear of your partner or that anxiety playing in the background, like I alluded to earlier. I think it's important for us to always have that introspection going and asking the Lord, what I call it, again, very non-clinical. I try to keep things simple. What I often will say to the Lord, I'll say, Lord, please take the icky ick out of me. I don't want any icky ick. I want to live with congruency, that what I profess, what I talk to people about, that's how I live behind closed doors. And it was interesting. I'll share a quick little story with you. So a couple years ago, we were driving to the airport to pick up my mother-in-law, and our youngest daughter was in the back seat riding with us, and she had fallen asleep, or so we thought. And Tim and I were just chit-chatting and talking as we were driving. It was about a 40-minute drive to the airport, and talking as we always do. And about 3/4 of the way through our conversation, our daughter, who at the time was 21, 22, she said, "Do you guys always talk like this to each other?" Because, of course, we've got a blended family now. So this was my biological daughter asking this question. And I said, "Sweetie, were you like that all the time?" Not that I would ever have anything to say that, whatever, I didn't want her to hear. And she said, "Well, kind of towards the end, yes, I was." And I said, "Well, to answer your question, yes. I mean, how you see us now, or how you heard us, we thought you were sleeping, is how we are behind closed doors, is how we are in public." So to answer your question, my litmus test for myself is, am I acting privately how I would act publicly? If those two are, and for me, it's important to be a person of integrity and honest. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, because there are times I have to apologize to my sweetie. Maybe I wasn't as patient, or, maybe I sounded and had some blame tone in my voice or whatever. I'm quick to say, typically, I'm sorry, honey. I don't want to hurt your heart. We make up because we don't like to have that friction or that feeling of like two positive poles, But I guess for me, it's just having that close walk with the Lord and just asking him, because in my prior relationship, and I talk about this in the book, there are things that I said, and there were things that I did, Rabbi, that I'm not proud of. I behaved in a way and that was one of the signs. And this is a good thing for your viewers. If you see yourself living and acting in a way that is not the core of who you are, that the abuse and the toxicity is changing you, that's a red flag. And so when I look back, I told myself back then, if I'm ever out of this, because I didn't ever think I was going to get divorced, and so I don't know what out of it meant. But as I did move towards divorce, when I did know I was going to get divorced, I said to myself, I'm going to be a better wife. Now, that doesn't mean that it makes for an abuser to be better. But I allowed myself to not always live, meaning how I would respond. I wasn't as patient. I was on edge a lot. Whereas now, in a safe context, both of us are free to speak, free to disagree, free to whatever, speak our minds without the fear of retribution. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but in the very end, I share a part of the story where I found out that Ben this was after I took him back after a 3-year separation. I found out that he was having an affair. And I tell people, I truly biblically believe that abuse severs the covenant, so you don't need to wait for your partner to cheat on you. And I have a lot of backing in the book for that I explain why I believe that's biblically sound. But when I found out about that, and when he was questioned, he lied, and he told our son that I was lying and I was crazy and da-da-da. And I had something I had printed out that I found, a communication between him and this person he was having an affair with. And my mother said, make a copy of it and save it. So I did. And it was in my robe pocket. And when Ben said, "You're lying, your mother's lying," I said, I took out the letter and I started reading it. And I said, "Are you sure I'm lying? Because this is you and her talking back and forth to each other." And he started to run after me. And true to form, I ran away. And I started running up the stairs, and there was something, Rabbi, in me that just from the toes up, just this anger that just rose up in me. And in my mind, I said to myself, I have ran from you for the last time in fear. And I'm not proud of this. I am not proud. But I turned around, and with every bit of strength in me, I just right across the kisser. And I do. That's one of a regret I have. I'm not proud of that. And his response to me was, "Is that all you've got?" So we can behave in ways that we wouldn't otherwise. I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm just using that to say, I get you. I wasn't like this little wife with little wings on her back. There were moments I was really upset, very upset. And, but yeah, abuse has a way of really altering the way we live, the way we see life, the way we see ourselves. It's just.
If we could teach people in marriage that the first time you have that feeling, the first time is the time that you should go into action to get help. The first time. That you have to recognize that if it happens once, you would love to believe it's isolated, but if you don't address it when it happens, you are leaving the door open for it to happen again, and you become somewhat of a participant in your own setting. Not that you're responsible for it, but because you took inaction is a decision. Okay? You can either act or not act. They're both decisions, which are choices that we make. And I think I told you that the 3 days into when the wedding band came flying across the room, I knew on the third day that this was a mistake, that this was something horrible, but I didn't feel I had any biblical grounds. And so I waited 15 years of living that way. And the flying of rings was just one of the many things that went on. But the first time, it should have been me taking a stand and saying, this can never happen again. When we get home, we're going to see somebody and we're going to talk this through, because I'm not going to live like this for the rest of the marriage. But I didn't. And I did wind up living that way for the rest of the marriage. And when I look back, and I see that as a watershed moment, I see that as a glimpse into something that I don't blame myself. I don't live with guilt or self-incrimination. But as I look back on it, and I knew I had that feeling, but I did not act upon that feeling. I tried to make amends. I tried to repair. I tried to comfort, to apologize, to do all the things, but I hadn't even done anything.
Right.
So it was all just words trying to find the right combination that would dissipate the fire. It was already ablaze. Water wasn't working, so I went to chemical. Chemical wasn't working, so I went to halon. Halon wasn't working, so I went to throwing a blanket over it. I did everything that I could to extinguish the fire, but there was always an ember. All right, and it was always the next thing that was going to cause it to ignite.
I think one of the best things a person can do to, in a sense, protect themselves or educate themselves from getting into a relationship that's going to end up being destructive and abusive in the end, or getting with an abusive partner, I should say, is educating yourself on what a healthy one looks like. It's like this. My mom, for many years, she worked for a bank. And she told me when she was a young teller that one of the things that they spent time teaching the new tellers is they trained them to know what a real dollar bill, what the real money looks like. And I said, well, Mom, isn't there like just a ton of counterfeits out there? Wouldn't you want to know? I was very young. So wouldn't you want to know what a counterfeit looks like? She said, and that's no. If you know what the real looks like, then you don't have to memorize all the counterfeits. If a person knows what a healthy relationship looks like, and even now, a lot of us, we don't have the good fortune of growing up. Most of us, have some sort of dysfunction in our past. Our parents, many of them tried their best. Some of our parents were absolutely awful and evil. Okay. So we may not have the best example to go by, but when you're an adult, we're responsible for our decisions. So if I could do a do-over, I would tell myself, self-educate yourself on what a healthy relationship looks like. So when you see the first sign of power and control, which whipping that ring across the kitchen was a power and control move, then you know, oh boy, I don't want to move forward in matrimony. But many of us, we aren't educated on what healthy looks like. We dismiss unhealthy. And then the kicker is that people with an abusive mentality, meaning lack of empathy, entitlement, a need for power and control, people with an abusive mentality, they don't come carrying a sign. If they came carrying a sign warning us that they were going to make our lives miserable and we would become a shell of the person we once were, and probably many of us financially broke and emotionally busted and maybe even physically injured, we'd run for the hills, but they don't come carrying a sign. So that's why we need to try to learn what healthy looks like.
Right. You have research, and Family and Child Abuse Prevention Center has research that says that only 1% of abusers actually change.
That's right.
And so we need to shatter this myth that if I just hang in there, that the abuser is going to change.
That's
that,
right.
That 99% of the time, the abuser never changes. They remain abusive. And so that is something that I think reinforces the fact that you have three main truths. One, that God does not cause your pain. Abuse is the responsibility of the abuser. And the abuser is going to continue to abuse.
That's right, because there's a lot of perks. Power control, you get your way. It's like a giant tantrum. Why is a two-year-old late? Well, because they want to have the cookie before dinner. If mom or dad or whoever gives them the cookie, then what's going to happen? They're going to continue kicking their feet on the ground. Okay, so when you have a 6'2" or a grown adult male, female throwing a tantrum, and you ignore it, you take responsibility for it, you pretend it didn't happen, you believe when they make these promises that they're going to change. That's like ignoring the 2-year-old on the ground. Abuse has to be met with some serious consequences. People need to know that they can risk losing the relationship or going to jail. And typically, like you just read the 1% of a statistic, only 1% change, even that's not enough to stop them because they blame their partner. They blame whomever. They do not look at themselves.
The power, the control, and this is a sin response in many times to an abuse that was perpetrated against them. And this is their sin response to that pain. They come from an abusive relationship. You don't come out of the womb an abuser.
That's right. But what the research shows, and I love another great book for your viewers to consider is Lundy Bancroft's book called Why Does He Do That Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men? And you can flip the pronoun, but if it's a female abuser that you're with, the point is, where was I going with that? Shoot. I just totally lost my thought. What were you just saying? I'm so sorry.
Is that...
Oh, I know what it was. It just came back to me.
Good.
That what he worked with several thousand men before he started the nation's first abusive men's group called Emerge. And this was like over 30 years ago. What he found is that people who experience child abuse, when they grow up as adults, statistically, the vast majority do not re-offend because they feel empathy for people because they themselves were hurt. So someone who was abused as a child does not typically abuse their adult partner. However, someone who grew up in a home where they saw a parent abusing another parent, now that statistically, they have a much greater probability of repeating that role model behavior. So I want to be very careful with that. Child abuse does not mean that people are going to reoffend, but if you've seen domestic violence, there's a more likely chance of it.
We've looked at some direct correlation of narcissism in the abuser. This is, I guess at the core of it is that I want my way and I'm willing to do anything to get my way. And I'll use every tool available to me to that end.
That's right.
And it will be at the expense of everyone. You had children with Ben, and how did the children respond to what they saw or perceived?
Mhm. That's the toughest part. That's the one part in the book, if I'm skimming through my book or whatever, that when I get to the part where I talk about my kids, that can still choke me up right now if I'm not careful. That's a tough one, Eric, because many times I left with the children. I would leave for a few hours. I'd leave for a night. I'd leave one time, even left for a week. I went to a nearby state. The kids, it affects them. It affects them, because what child doesn't want to see their parents like being joyful and happy and, staying together? And my kids, they all have three very different personalities. The first one was more quiet about it. The oldest one didn't really speak much, was always kind of there with me, though, by my side. My middle one, our son, he would really struggle. We would leave. He'd be fine with leaving. He'd want to get out of there himself. But then when he was little, he'd be like, Mama, let's go back. I want you to work out. And then my littlest one was, I always said, like my little bulldog. She was the one like, leave, don't, he's terrible. You can do this, Mom. And so depending on your child's personality, they're going to handle it different ways. But the bottom line is it affects them. It scares them. And I believe that my children, I know, struggle with different levels of PTSD, just like I did, and it's taken them, and they're each finding their own path. It's a tough one. The lines of communication with my children are very open, and we talk about it. But it's still painful for them. It'll still bring tears to our eyes. It's like you said earlier, you never quite just forget, or I don't even think that's humanly possible. I do believe you heal, and we heal at different layers. And I'm still healing. That's why I call it healing, ING. I'm still healing just like you are.
Well, that's exactly right. We've been talking with Dr. Ramona Probasco, as we do on the third Monday of every month at the 11 o'clock Central Time hour. She is the author of Healing Well and Living Free from an Abusive Relationship, from Victim to Survivor to Overcomer. We're committed on this network and this program to bringing you truth, and the truth will set you free. It's the biblical foundation of this process of healing and grabbing a hold of the one that took this pain for you. But yet you're living a life in pain. You're living a life where you're being abused. You're living a life where you're being spoken to, treated, mistreated in so many different ways. And that is not the life that God has for you. And if you don't know the life that God has for you, then you need to get to know God and the Messiah, the one that He sent to take your suffering upon Him. Meaning that you may go through difficult times, but you will never go through them alone. And that there is great wisdom and there's deep understanding. That this was never God's plan for your life, so this isn't something to blame God for. God will never leave you or forsake you. That He has a watchful eye. He who watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And the foundation of Dr. Ramona's book is not just psychology, because that's what she's a doctor of. It's her personal experience and finding in her faith and being able to grab a hold of the one who grabbed a hold of her, the one who contends with everything that she contends with, and partnering with Him, that between you and the Lord, you have the strength to extract yourself and heal from an abusive relationship. This is a guidebook, a story from a personal perspective that will not only navigate you through your circumstance, but also take you to the other side, which is an overcomer. Dr. Ramona, it is always a joy to be with you, and our time goes way too fast. But we will see you on the 18th of the next month, next March, on March 18th, next month, at the same time. So we wish you and your sweetie God's blessings until I see you again.
Likewise, thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.